Welcome to Get Chatty About Your Local Businesses, a podcast about small businesses serving the LGBT+, friends and ally community in Melbourne and Victoria. In this and the next episode, I'll be talking to Steve, the jetlag guy. When he's not predicting Olympic medal counts, he works with business travelers to overcome the worst effects of jet lag, allowing them to be productive during and after their travels. We will be talking about his ecosystem of services and products during our main interview next episode. But first, we are taking a look into his career path and his own experience about long flights and coping with jet lag, and why it's important to understand your chronotype to manage yourself. There's a bit of science ahead, so if you're using Spotify or YouTube, I encourage you to switch on your caption function so you can pick up some ideas to further research. Welcome to this episode of Get Chatty About Your Local Businesses, and today we're in person with the jetlag guy, Steve. Hi,
Hello.
Steve. How are you?
Hello, everyone. I'm very well.
Yeah, thank you. This is one of the first in-person recordings, so thank you so much for being here. And
thank you for inviting me.
Oh no, we're testing this out, so we might go to shit. But I mean, before that happened, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, please?
Okay, so I started off life as a pharmacist. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for several years, and I fell into a role, and part of it was working on the Viagra clinical trials, but that's a story for later. But then I ended up in a global HIV/AIDS trial, and I ended up doing the crazy flights, which happens in the pharmaceutical industry. Fly to America for a week, and you pop by London for a few days on your way back while you're in the neighborhood, so to speak. And I think the craziest flight I've done was to fly to Buenos Aires for 3 days. So I flew there, then 3 days working there, then straight back home. So that was less than a week that I was away. And I did an MBA. I was looking to do project management work. Nothing came with the MBA, so I thought I'll do a PhD. And my PhD was in jet lag and executive performance, but from a management perspective. So it was an international management degree, not a scientific one. But I've got a science background. And, we know how to fix jet lag. It's a simple thing to fix. But bringing that to the business community in particular has been challenging. So that's where I fit in.
Wow, that's a very
detailed.
That's a really good amount of stories in there.
A lot of story in there.
Well, I mean, I think one of the things well, I guess what I would love to find out about is the why. Like we know who you are, but why? Why this path? Because it's quite a whirl from trained as a pharmacist to jet lag, and
look, it's a series of left turns. My career is a series of left turns that are so many, it's like a corkscrew.
Yeah.
But it actually makes sense. Like I started off as a pharmacist. I moved into the pharmaceutical industry. I was building on my knowledge as a pharmacist. They love pharmacists there because, we know drugs. And then I fell into drug safety surveillance. So if something goes wrong, filing a report, who do I file the report, all that sort of thing. That was my thing in the pharmaceutical industry. The professional term is pharmacovigilance, that sort of drug safety area. And then I did the travel. Now, as I said, I wanted to do project management because I was kind of doing it on an informal basis. I was managing things and setting timelines, etc. I wanted that qualification, so that's why I did the MBA, get the financial literacy, which I got. And then at the end of it, nothing interesting for me came up. So I thought, you know what, I'll do a PhD. I'm not sure why that was. And then I was honestly looking for something to do. And as soon as I mentioned jet lag and travel, everyone said, yes, that is what you should research. And I thought, yeah, that. And I love it because it's bringing together the two career strands, if you like. I've got international management. I've got that management theory that I learned in the MBA and all that sort of thing, plus the scientific background. So my PhD was a bit of a Frankenstein degree. I had international management and chronobiology, biology specifically around the circadian rhythm.
Oh my.
Yeah, getting someone to examine that's fun.
It's.
I'm a slashy. I'm an absolute slashy.
Oh, you mentioned just a little bit earlier that there's a flight from Australia to Buenos Aires.
Yes.
Can you tell me how
Santiago.
it was sent? So that was, how was the flight? Was it like
Well, the
from
flight itself was fine. I mean, it's boring from Auckland to Santiago because there's absolutely nothing to see. 4 flights going there, 3 flights going there. So I flew from Melbourne to Sydney to get the LATAM because I needed to make that connection. They said fly up to Sydney, so I did. And then so I left Melbourne before dawn, got to Sydney early morning. Then I have to change terminals, which, if you know Sydney, you've got that crummy little bus. And then off to Auckland. And if you've ever flown through Auckland, you're stuck there for hours. Because if a plane lands in Auckland, they have to fumigate the plane, and you have to get off the plane because you can't be in there with the fumes. So you're sitting around Auckland Airport waiting for the fumes to die down. And then finally, at about sunset, I flew out of Auckland. And then I had the long flight to Santiago.
Yep.
And it's amazing. If you fly to South America, it's like nothing, mountains, because the Andes are very close to the coast. So you suddenly see these snow-capped peaks after seeing nothing.
So that was a day and a half.
No, it was 24 hours.
24 hours.
And then I had to change planes in Santiago, and everyone speaks Spanish. I don't. So I'm sort of guessing. At least Spanish I can kind of get. Got my flight to Buenos Aires, and then you fly over the Andes, which is amazing. The mountain seems to stretch forever. It's beautiful. Flew into Buenos Aires airport, which is Ezeiza, which is a long way from the city. So they'd arranged a chauffeur, a limo.
Ooh, that's fancy.
Well, it was fancy, but I'm so glad they did because I had no way of getting into the city.
Oh.
And as you go from the airport, it's about 50 kilometers at least out of town. So I got chauffeured in. And Buenos Aires is a city of something like 11 million, 12 million people. There's a lot. It's a big city. And just to be, being chauffeured in this city is just wonderful,
So that...
And then I got there. And of course you get there, AM becomes PM, PM becomes AM. And I was just tired. I fell asleep. I got to my hotel room. I just crashed.
That was...
Then I woke up at 2 a.m, bright-eyed. Now, this is before I was a jet lag researcher, you understand?
Yeah.
I decided to go for a walk.
2 a.m.
2 a.m. in a strange city that I don't know, where I don't speak the language.
Okay.
That's not my brightest idea.
Well...
I survived. I wasn't mugged. I wasn't killed. I was offered the services of an attractive woman with a moustache, which I declined. But, and they said, oh, yes, there's always people there. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
But, yeah, so I know what it's like to have a head full of jet lag.
How does that affect jet lag?
Oh, that's a big question. That's a really big question.
Oh, shit. I just dropped the bomb.
No, well, it's a big one. It's one of the keys to jet lag. The first key to jet lag is knowing yourself. And by that, I mean if you're a morning person or a night person or in between. And
Not morning person. Not morning.
Neither. And so that fact, and we have this societal prejudice against night owls. We do, We've heard the phrase "early to bed, early to rise makes man healthy, wealthy, and wise." We've all heard that. It's nonsense. If you do 8 hours work, you do 8 hours work. It doesn't matter when you do it. And there's a woman in Denmark I know on LinkedIn, and she's passionate about transforming the conversation around that. But knowing it's the technical term is your chronotype, and it's genetic. If you've got, now let me get this right, an 18 amino acid sequence deletion, if you're homozygous for that, means both chromosomes got it, it's on the PER3 gene on the Q portion of chromosome 1. And none of that you have to remember. But it's a genetic thing, and you're not going to change that.
I'm so glad that there's auto-generated transcript.
Absolutely. And look, there's a book that came out a few years ago, and it comes out. This sort of thing comes out every few years. The latest one is called the 5 a.m. Club. It's the worst of American hustle culture. I hate it. I hate it with a passion. It says get up at 5 a.m. and charge through. It's like, no, charge through when your brain is clear. Don't wake up at 5 a.m. and do things in a fog. That's just stupid.
I would say that because we just had our daylight saving finished, ended, and even that change of 1 hour did my head in.
Well, and it's funny, but there's actually researchers who look into that, and the change that happens in springtime when you lose an hour is much worse for your health. There's an increased risk of heart attacks and strokes and car accidents in that period.
Oh, geez.
The one that we've just had now, it's glum that it's dark at 6 o'clock now, but at the same time, I find it that much easier to get up in the morning because the sun is shining in.
Yes, so, that's true. Because sorry.
Daylight saving is a mini jet lag.
Yes.
Second key is the direction of your flight, as we pointed out. And for most of us, east is a beast, west is best. For most of us, okay? If you're an early morning person, it's the other way around. Now, let me explain. Say you get on a plane and you fly from here in Australia to London, right?
Yep.
Your day seems to stretch out. Whether you have a long night or a long day, it seems to stretch out. So what you have to do is stay up late and then sleep in. If you're a night owl, that's easy. For most of us, that's easy. When you fly back from London, the day seems to shrink. So you have to go to bed early when you're not tired yet and wake up early when you're still tired. That's harder for most people, unless you're a morning person and you sort of get up at 4:30 a.m. and you're ready to go. And,
are you mad?
Well, I'm not saying you or me. I'm talking hypothetically people out there that might do that. And again, it's their genetics, it's their wiring.
Yes.
It's not ours, clearly. So for most people, factoring in, and it's two different mechanisms that our bodies adjust to. And I've heard of people who fly east and they don't adjust that way. I've experienced it, where instead of waking up, you just stay up later and you seem to go around the other way. So, because it's two mechanisms, they're called phase advance and phase delay. They're the actual mechanisms. So they're two different mechanisms.
Wow.
So that's the second key. Yeah. And the last one is light. And using sunlight or substitutes. We can talk about that a bit later.
Yes.
So sunlight substitutes to adjust your jet lag.
Signal your brain.
Yeah.
And it's really important because just even like a mini jet lag of daylight saving adjustment, that's already enough to like fuck someone up. Like myself, that I was useless for the first hour in the office.
Yeah.
And then and the health, but and the health effect on people when they are traveling a long distance, it's very tricky.
They're significant. They're quite significant. Increased risk of strokes, heart attacks, diabetes, addictions. It's all been shown with business travelers, which is quite scary. We have receptors in our eyes that pick up sunlight, and it has nothing to do with vision. So we've got 5 different types of receptors in our eyes that pick up light.
Yep.
And 3 of them are for color vision, the long, medium, short length wave. And people who are colorblind, the long one either is missing or it's sort of mutated and it's not quite right. Then you've got vision for low-level lighting. So if you're in a dim room, you can still see. You won't see much detail and you won't see color. You notice if you're looking, you won't see color. If you already know what color something is, your brain will put that color there. But if you don't know what color it is, you don't know, and you might see the wrong color because it's black and white.
So sorry, go on.
And then the last one is for the circadian rhythm. It has nothing to do with vision. It's just we know when it's daylight.
Wow, it is the result of evolution, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and this is a very primitive one. I mean, the last one in terms of evolution is that long wavelength one. So we know when fruit is ripe, which gives us a big advantage because fruit goes from green to yellow or red. Other animals don't have that red. That one is a fairly primitive one. And I met a young man who went blind at the age of 16. He had this horrible rare syndrome where his optic nerve just packed it in. Went blind, but he could still knew when it was daylight. His circadian rhythm was still working.
So that was those other sensors.
Yeah,
in
those
the
other
eyes.
receptors were still there,
Receptors.
even though the other mechanisms weren't.
I see. Oh gosh, wow, that's a big learning today. What your story is very interesting because in so many ways that you're a crossover of health and medicine and business.
That's it, and that's it. I come to it from a different perspective. We have really good sleep researchers. This country has some of the best. SBS have just done a show. We've got some really good work. So we know how the circadian rhythm works. We know about sleep research. We know about sleep cycles and melatonin and all that. Then you've got the business community, and there's no knowledge, and they're doing stupid things like the 5 a.m. club, which is get up at 5 a.m. Business travelers. All that happened to me, and everyone that I interviewed for my research is like, here's your ticket, off you go, best of luck. May the odds be ever in your favor. That's not how to have people perform. And people aren't necessarily going to perform at their peak. And we should, first of all, we have a duty of care to look after staff. We also want them to perform at their peak, and also when they get home. And that component is interesting. When I interview people, they kept coming up with the phrase running on adrenaline. They were running on adrenaline, which is like... But
what happened when you're off the adrenaline?
When they're off the adrenaline, they fall in a heap. And it's the domestic life that suffers. Relationships suffer. And people either end up divorced because the other partner says, well, I'm being a single parent
or
burnt out.
Mental health.
Or they just leave. All sorts of consequences. So that's why I'm passionate about it. It's like bridging those two silos. The science community, we know what jet lag is and how to manage it. The business community, like, nope, no idea.
This is one of the things that I enjoy doing this podcast, because meeting people like yourself that are doing things that are so different from what I do, but then you're contributing to the world and also people in the business space. There's because there are so many different things that we need to consider, and when it comes to trying to live a full life, and for this listeners to this podcast that we're talking about, writing your own story, walking your own path, but it's not an easy journey. And when you have a fucked up sleep, then it's not gonna help. And
there's so many health consequences. Sleep is one of the pillars of health. It's along with nutrition and exercise and socializing. It's one of the basic pillars of health. We ignore it at our peril. And
the thing is, if someone would go to the gym to build their body and look a certain way or have a certain level of health, then why not also look into your sleep, your rest? Because
you can't perform at your peak in the gym if you have had not enough sleep. Your body won't deal with nutrients appropriately if you haven't had enough sleep. Sleep just underpins everything. And don't get up at 5 a.m. if you don't want to. That's just stupid.
No. And I got more questions for you.
Oh, good.
Well,
I keep giving long answers.
No, that's good. That's good. It's amazing, because if it gets too long, we'll make it part 1 and part 2. And I did. Yes, editing Arthur here. It was such a good conversation with Steve. That's why I am making it 2 parts, so we got some spotlight for each topic. And I think now, armed with better info about jet lag itself, we are ready for part 2 of this interview, which will include Steve's 2024 Olympic predictions. We're going to take a look at the business side of the jet lag guy. I had such fun doing this interview, and I can't wait to share with you during the next episode of Get Chatty about your local businesses in a fortnight. See you next time.